Are you going to deny that you're the father of my baby?
Ethan Cole learned early that life did not bend for good intentions. At 26, he already carried the weight of responsibilities that most men his age had never touched. He woke before sunrise every morning in their small second-floor apartment, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Lily. The kettle whistled softly. Bread toasted. A single lunchbox waited on the counter, decorated with faded cartoon stickers Lily had chosen herself. His daughter was 6, bright-eyed, stubborn, endlessly curious. She had his dark hair and her mother's smile, a combination that sometimes hurt to look at. Her mother had left when Lily was 2. No fight, no goodbye. Just a note on the kitchen table that said she couldn't live this life anymore. So Ethan did. He became both parent and protector, comfort and discipline, bedtime storyteller and early morning alarm. There were days he felt like he was only pretending to be strong, but pretending was often enough to get through another hour. After walking Lily to school each morning, Ethan caught the train downtown to Halston and Green, a consulting firm built on glass walls, tailored suits, and silent expectations. He worked as an executive assistant, a position that demanded perfection but offered little recognition. He arrived early, left late, and never once complained. Because he couldn't afford to. His boss, Claire Whitmore, ruled her corner of the firm with an intensity that bordered on fear. She was everything Ethan wasn't: confident, commanding, untouchable. Her heels clicked through the halls like a warning. Her words were precise, clipped, never wasted on warmth. "Ethan, I need the reports by 9. Ethan, cancel my 3 o'clock. Ethan, this margin is wrong." He answered every command without hesitation. She never asked about his life, and he never offered. He kept Lily invisible at work, no photos on his desk, no stories, no excuses for leaving early. Personal lives, he had learned, were weaknesses in a place like this. That Thursday, the firm prepared for a celebration in a private downtown lounge. A major merger had closed, and executives were eager to toast their success. Ethan was not there to celebrate. He was there to manage logistics, confirm reservations, and make sure Claire's evening ran flawlessly. The city outside glowed with rain and neon. Inside, the bar hummed with expensive laughter and polished ambition. Claire stood at the center of it all, commanding attention in a deep red dress that cut sharply against the neutral tones of the room. She accepted congratulations with practiced grace, her glass never empty for long. Ethan noticed something was wrong before anyone else did. Claire laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Her posture softened. The edge in her eyes dulled. He watched her hand tremble slightly as she set her glass down. By the time the crowd began thinning, she was unsteady on her heels. "Ethan," she said, gripping the bar for balance. "I think I may have had more than I intended." He stepped closer, concern tightening his chest. "I can call you a car." She shook her head, a faint frown pulling at her lips. "Not tonight. I don't trust strangers right now." There was something in her voice he had never heard before: vulnerability. "Real, unguarded, I can take you home," he said carefully. The rain had deepened by the time they reached his old sedan parked along the curb. He helped her inside, holding the door steady as she sank into the seat. The drive was quiet. Streetlights blurred across the wet windows. Claire stared out at the city as though it were suddenly unfamiliar. "You're always so quiet," she said softly. "I just focus on my work." She glanced at him. "No, you're hiding something." He said nothing. When they arrived at her apartment building, a towering glass structure overlooking the river, she stumbled on the curb. Ethan caught her without thinking, steadying her with a firm grip. For a moment she leaned into him, her forehead brushing his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside, he guided her to the couch and brought her water. She drank slowly, exhaustion settling into her features. The commanding executive was gone. In her place sat a tired woman, shoulders heavy, eyes unguarded. "Ethan," she said, voice low, "why do you never talk about your life?" The question struck deeper than he expected. "I don't think it matters," she studied him. "It matters." Something in the room shifted, quiet, fragile. "I have a daughter," he said. "Lily, I raise her alone." Claire blinked. "You're a single father?" He nodded. "Her mother left years ago." For a long moment she didn't speak. "I had no idea," she said softly. He gave a small shrug. It's not relevant here, but it was. For the first time, she seemed to see him not as a function, but as a man carrying a life on his shoulders. You should go home, she said. You look like you haven't slept in years. He stood. At the door, she spoke again. Ethan, thank you for tonight. He nodded and left, unaware that this quiet moment, this simple act of decency, had just set his world on a path he would never be able to undo. Ethan did not sleep much that night. He lay awake in the narrow bed of his apartment, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed faintly beyond the thin walls. The rain had stopped, but the memory of it still clung to him, the blurred streetlights, the quiet inside the car, the strange vulnerability in Claire's voice when she asked about his life. He was used to carrying weight, but this felt different. Not heavier, just unexpected. At dawn, Lily padded into his room in mismatched socks, her hair a storm of tangles. "Daddy, you forgot to wake me up." He smiled and scooped her into his arms. "I was waiting for my alarm clock to wake me instead," she giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck. The morning unfolded in familiar rituals. Toast, slightly burned. Juice spilled and wiped away, Lily talking about her spelling test and how her teacher said she read like a big kid now. Ethan listened, nodded, and tried to anchor himself in the ordinary. But something was different inside him. A tightness, a quiet unease he couldn't name. When he dropped Lily at school, she hugged him longer than usual. He watched her disappear into the building, backpack bouncing against her small shoulders, and whispered the same promise he made every morning. "I've got you." The train downtown felt louder than usual. Every face reflected in the windows seemed sharp, alert, untouched by whatever storm churned inside him. By the time he reached the firm, the building loomed like it always had, cold, towering, indifferent. Inside, the energy was tense. Colleagues clustered in hushed conversations. Someone stopped talking when he approached. Another avoided his eyes entirely. Ethan slowed, confusion knotting in his chest. At his desk, his inbox was already overflowing. Subject lines glared back at him. Urgent, meeting request, HR follow-up. His phone vibrated. "Ethan," said a woman's voice from Human Resources. "Miss Whitmore would like to see you immediately." His pulse quickened. "Is something wrong?" There was a pause. "Please come to her office." He stood, smoothing the front of his jacket as though composure could be worn like armor. Claire's office was quiet. The blinds were half-drawn, muting the bright city outside. She stood near the window, arms crossed, posture perfect as always. But when she turned, something in her eyes stopped him. Not anger, fear. "Close the door," she said. He did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavier than any reprimand he had ever received. "Did anything happen last night?" she asked carefully. "That I don't remember?" The words hit him with a force he hadn't anticipated. "No," he said immediately. "You were tired. I helped you inside. That's all." Her gaze searched his face. "You're certain?" "Completely." She exhaled slowly, fingers tightening around the pen in her hand. "I woke up this morning with a gap," she said. "Not about what happened, but about how vulnerable I was. And I realized I didn't know how it might look to someone else." A chill spread through him. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "There was a report." His heart thudded in his chest. "A report?" "One of the cleaning staff saw you helping me upstairs. They assumed something inappropriate. They told security." The room seemed to tilt. "But nothing happened," he said. "You know that?" "I do," she said quietly. "But the firm doesn't operate on certainty. It operates on liability." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but she continued. "HR is opening a formal review. Until it's resolved, you're being placed on administrative leave." "Leave?" His voice sounded distant, even to himself. "Yes." "Paid?" She hesitated. "No." The word dropped like a stone between them. "I live paycheck to paycheck," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I have a daughter. I can't afford—" "I know," she said, and for the first time her voice cracked. "But if I intervene, it will look like I'm protecting you for personal reasons. That could make things worse." He stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman before him with the one who had leaned against him hours earlier, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You asked me if something happened," he said softly. "That question, that's what started this." Her jaw tightened. I asked because I was afraid, she said. Not of you. Of myself. Of what vulnerability can do in a place like this. The irony was almost unbearable. The meeting ended without ceremony. No apology. No reassurance. Just procedure. When Ethan stepped into the hallway, his badge no longer worked. He stood there, staring at the locked door as coworkers passed by pretending not to see him. By noon, his email access was revoked. By evening, his career hung in a silence no one was willing to break. The first week without work felt unreal. Ethan woke at the same hour, made Lily breakfast, walked her to school, but instead of heading downtown, he returned to the apartment and sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. He sent emails to HR. He left voicemails. He drafted careful explanations no one seemed willing to read. The bills did not pause. Rent, utilities, school supplies, groceries, each envelope that slid through the mail slot felt heavier than the last. By the end of the second week, he sold his old guitar, the one he used to play before Lily was born, before life narrowed into responsibility. He told himself it was temporary. At night, after Lily fell asleep, he lay on the couch, replaying the moment in Claire's office again and again. Did anything happen last night that I don't remember? He wondered how a single question could fracture a life so completely. Lily noticed the change. "Daddy, why are you home so much?" she asked one afternoon as they sat on the floor coloring. He smiled. "I just have a little break from work." "Like vacation?" "Something like that." She considered this. "Vacations are supposed to be fun," he swallowed. "We'll make it fun," but the fun felt forced. Each outing to the park came with the knowledge that the money spent on ice cream could have gone toward electricity. Each bedtime story was shadowed by calculations he never voiced. One evening, when the lights flickered and went out mid-dinner, Lily's eyes widened. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" He knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart. Just a little problem. It'll be okay." They ate by candlelight, the shadows dancing across the walls. Lily laughed, pretending they were explorers camping in the wild. Ethan smiled for her, and cried later in the bathroom where she couldn't see. 3 weeks into the review, a letter finally arrived. No findings of misconduct. Case closed. Relief flooded through him, sharp, overwhelming. He called HR immediately. "So I'm reinstated?" he asked. There was another pause. "Your position has been, reassessed," the representative said carefully. "The firm has decided not to continue your employment." Ethan felt his breath leave his body. "But I was cleared?" "Yes, however, given the circumstances, your continued presence is considered a reputational risk." "Reputational risk?" He hung up the phone and sat in silence. That evening, he told Lily they were having a special dinner. He made her favorite macaroni and cheese with sliced hot dogs, the kind they only ate when money was tight. She watched him from the table. "Daddy, are we okay?" He forced a smile. "We're always okay," she nodded, trusting him completely. That trust cut deeper than any accusation ever could. The phone rang 2 days later. It was Claire. "I need to see you," she said. "Please." They met at a small cafe near the river. The winter light filtered through the windows, pale and distant. Claire looked different, less polished, more human. Her hair was pulled back loosely, dark circles faintly visible beneath her eyes. "I fought for you," she said immediately. "I truly did," he said nothing. "They cleared you, but they won't bring you back. They say the situation creates too much uncertainty." "Uncertainty?" He echoed. "I helped you. That's it. And because of that I lost everything." Her eyes glistened. "I know. Do you?" His voice trembled despite his effort to control it. "You know what it's like to explain to a 6-year-old why the lights don't turn on? To sell your belongings one by one just to keep food on the table?" She flinched. "I never meant for this to happen," she said. "I asked a question born out of fear, not truth. And you paid for it." Silence stretched between them. "Why did you call me here?" he asked finally. She reached into her bag and slid an envelope across the table. "A severance package," she said. "And a letter of recommendation. I contacted a colleague who runs a nonprofit consulting group. They need someone with your discipline. It doesn't pay like Halston and Green, but it's honest." He stared at the envelope, his hands shaking as he picked it up. "You don't owe me this." "Yes, I do," she said quietly. Because I asked a question that shattered your life. For a long moment he couldn't speak. Part of him wanted to walk away, to reject the help, to cling to the dignity he felt had already been stripped from him. But then he thought of Lily. He nodded. "Thank you," he said. She closed her eyes as if the words both relieved and wounded her. "I wish I could undo it," she whispered. "So do I." That night, Ethan sat beside Lily's bed as she slept, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I promise." He did not know what the future held. Only that the past could not be changed. One night, one question. One moment of doubt, and yet there was still tomorrow. For Lily, he would keep moving forward, even if the cost of doing the right thing had nearly broken him. The first morning at the nonprofit felt unreal. Ethan stood outside the modest brick building, the envelope from Claire folded carefully in his coat pocket. The sign above the door read Riverbridge Community Consulting, no glass tower. No marble floors, just chipped paint and a handwritten flyer taped to the window advertising free budgeting workshops. It wasn't the world he had built his life around, but it was a door that hadn't closed. Inside, the receptionist greeted him with a tired smile. "You must be Ethan. They're expecting you." As he followed her down the narrow hallway, a strange mix of gratitude and grief settled in his chest. Gratitude for the chance to work again. Grief for everything that had been taken from him, his career, his confidence, his sense of safety. His new supervisor, Mark Alvarez, was nothing like Claire. No tailored suit, no clipped authority. Just a man in rolled-up sleeves with coffee stains on his desk. "Your resume is impressive," Mark said, shaking his hand. "We're lucky to have you," Ethan nodded, unsure how to accept praise anymore. The work was different. Instead of advising corporations on profit margins, he was helping struggling community centers stay afloat, drafting budgets, negotiating with vendors, explaining financial systems to people who had never had anyone explain them before. It mattered. But it didn't erase what had happened. Every night after Lily fell asleep, the memory returned. Claire's office. The half-drawn blinds. Her voice asking, "Did anything happen last night that I don't remember?" The question replayed itself until it felt carved into him, not because of what it implied, but because of what it had unleashed. Weeks passed. The severance money softened the sharpest edges of survival, but it didn't rebuild what had been lost. Ethan's savings were gone. His professional network had quietly disappeared. Messages went unanswered. Former colleagues avoided his eyes when he passed them on the street. Once, he spotted two people from Halston and Green at a coffee shop. They noticed him, froze, and then pretended not to. It was as if he had become a ghost present, but untouchable. At home, Lily remained his anchor. She sensed that something in their lives had changed, even if she didn't understand it. The apartment felt smaller now, quieter. Their outings were fewer, no more surprise treats. No more new clothes unless absolutely necessary. One evening, as Ethan packed her lunch for the next day, Lily sat at the kitchen table swinging her legs. "Daddy," she said softly, "did I do something bad at school?" He looked up, startled. "What? No, why would you think that?" She shrugged. "You look sad a lot." "I thought maybe I made you in trouble." His heart tightened. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. "Listen to me," he said gently. "Nothing that's happening is because of you." "Not even a little." She studied his face, searching for certainty. "You promise?" "I promise with everything I have." She leaned forward and hugged him, her arms thin but fierce around his neck. "I love you, Daddy. I love you more than anything," he whispered. He stayed there long after she went to bed, holding the quiet like something fragile. Despite the new job, the past refused to loosen its grip. At Riverbridge, people trusted him quickly. They thanked him for help he felt he barely deserved. One woman cried in his office because his advice had saved her program from closing. "You gave us a future," she said. The words echoed painfully. "I lost mine." On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Mark invited him for coffee. "You're good at this," Mark said. "Not just the numbers. You actually see people." Ethan stared into his cup. "I didn't always," Mark hesitated. "I know something happened at your last job," Ethan stiffened. "I don't need details," Mark added quickly. "Just, if you ever want to talk." Ethan nodded, grateful but unwilling. Some wounds didn't want witnesses. The call from Claire came 2 months later. "I don't expect you to answer," she said on his voicemail. "But I need to tell you something, please." He listened to the message 3 times before calling back. They met again at the same cafe by the river. This time, spring sunlight shimmered across the water, mocking the heaviness inside him. "You look better," she said. He gave a tired smile. "I have to." She folded her hands on the table. "I've been thinking about that morning. About the question I asked you." His jaw tightened. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," she said. "I was scared. Not of you, but of what it meant to be seen as weak, vulnerable. I've spent my entire career making sure no one ever doubts my control." He said nothing. And the moment I woke up and realized how exposed I had been, I panicked. Instead of trusting what I knew, I let fear speak for me. Her voice wavered. "And that fear destroyed your life." The words landed like a confession. "Do you know what that question did to me?" Ethan said quietly. She nodded. "No," he continued. "I don't think you do." She looked at him, eyes glossy. "It made me doubt myself. For the first time in my life, I wondered if being kind was a mistake. If doing the right thing was something people like me couldn't afford." He swallowed. "It made me afraid to help anyone again." Silence settled between them. "I can't undo what happened," she whispered. "But I want you to know, I believe you." "I always did." He met her gaze. But belief wasn't enough. She closed her eyes. That night, the past returned in full force. Ethan lay awake, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. Lily slept in the next room, breathing softly. He remembered the moment he had reached for Claire's arm as she stumbled. How instinctive it had been. How natural. If he had hesitated, if he had simply let her fall and called a cab, none of this would have happened. The realization burned. Kindness cost me everything, and yet... He thought of Lily, of her trust, of the way she still believed the world was safe because he told her it was. If he taught her that doing the right thing was dangerous, what kind of world would she inherit? The question haunted him until dawn. 2 weeks later, the past knocked again, this time in the form of a letter. It came from Halston and Green's legal department. Ethan stared at the envelope before opening it, a familiar dread tightening his chest. Inside was a brief statement. "In light of recent internal audits, the firm has determined that the actions taken regarding your employment were in compliance with company policy. No further correspondence will be issued on this matter." No apology, no acknowledgement, just closure that felt more like erasure. He folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer, unable to bring himself to throw it away. That evening, Lily found him sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "Daddy," she said, climbing beside him. "Can I tell you a secret?" He smiled faintly. "Always." She leaned in and whispered, "When I grow up, I want to help people." "Like you?" His throat tightened. "Why?" he asked. "Because helping people makes you a hero," she said matter-of-factly. He pulled her into his arms. "You're already a hero to me," he said. She grinned and ran off to get her coloring book. He stayed there, letting the weight in his chest soften just a little. At work, something began to change. Not in the world, but in him. He stopped measuring himself by what he had lost and started noticing what he still had. A child who trusted him completely. A job where his work made real differences. People who saw him, not as a liability, but as someone worth listening to. One afternoon, a teenager named Marcus came into Riverbridge's office. His family's community center was on the verge of shutting down. "I don't understand any of this," Marcus said, pushing a stack of papers toward Ethan. "They said if we don't fix the numbers, we're done." Ethan spent 2 hours walking him through the documents, explaining each line patiently. At the end, Marcus looked up. "No one ever took the time like this before," he said. "They just told us we were failing," Ethan smiled gently. "You're not failing. You just needed someone to show you the system." As Marcus left, Ethan felt something unfamiliar purpose. Not the hollow prestige of corporate success, but something deeper. Still, the nights remained difficult. One evening, as he tucked Lily into bed, she asked quietly, "Daddy, do people ever stop being mad?" He froze. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "At school, Mia said her dad did something bad at work and now people don't talk to him anymore." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. Sometimes, he said carefully, people get scared. And when they're scared, they make decisions that hurt others. Is that what happened to you? The innocence of the question nearly broke him. Yes, he admitted softly. Something like that. Are they mad at you? Some of them, she thought about this. Well, I'm not, she said firmly. Tears blurred his vision. Neither am I, he whispered. Months later, a strange opportunity arose. Mark called him into his office one afternoon. I was contacted by a journalist, Mark said. They're doing a piece on workplace policies and unintended consequences. Someone mentioned your situation, Ethan's stomach twisted. I don't want publicity, I know, but your story could matter. It could change how companies treat people in situations like yours. Ethan hesitated. For so long, he had wanted nothing more than to disappear from what had happened. To bury it? But what if speaking out meant no one else had to lose everything for doing the right thing? That night, he stood at Lily's doorway, watching her sleep. Would it be okay if I tell the truth? He whispered to the quiet, not for revenge, but for meaning. The interview was published a week later. It didn't name Claire. It didn't attack the firm. It simply told the story of a single father who helped his intoxicated boss home and lost his job because of fear and liability. The response was immediate. Emails poured in from strangers, people who had faced similar situations, people who thanked him for saying what they never could. One message stood out. You reminded me that integrity still matters even when the world punishes it. Ethan stared at the screen, something warm and unfamiliar rising in his chest. For the first time since that night, he felt seen. Later that evening, Lily sat beside him on the couch. Daddy, she said, my teacher said she read about you. His heart skipped. She did? She said you were brave. He smiled, pulling her close. Sometimes, he said, being brave just means telling the truth. She leaned against him, content. In that moment, he realized something. The question that shattered his life had also stripped it down to what truly mattered, not status, not reputation, but love, integrity, and the quiet courage to keep going. Even when everything else was taken away, the backlash came quietly at first. Ethan expected something, anger, criticism, maybe even retaliation after the article was published. Instead, what arrived was subtler and far more disorienting. Silence, no calls from former colleagues, no acknowledgement from Halston and Green, no message from Claire. The world did not rush to correct what had happened to him. It simply absorbed his story and moved on. At Riverbridge, the response was warmer. Clients thanked him. A few donors mentioned they had read the piece and admired his integrity. Mark clapped him on the shoulder and said, You did something that mattered. But when Ethan went home each night, the reality remained unchanged. The apartment was still small. The fridge still sparse. The numbers in his bank account still hovered just above empty. Telling the truth hadn't restored what he had lost. It had only made the loss more visible. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows, Ethan sat at the kitchen table sorting bills. Lily colored beside him, humming softly, unaware of the quiet storm forming in his chest. Rent was due in 4 days. The severance was gone. His paycheck from Riverbridge barely covered essentials. He had already asked the landlord for an extension the previous month. Asking again felt like admitting something he refused to accept, that no amount of honesty or effort could change their reality. He folded the papers and pushed them aside. Daddy, look, Lily said, holding up her drawing. It was the two of them standing under a crooked sun, holding hands. That's beautiful, he said, forcing a smile. She beamed. That's us. You're always holding my hand. His chest tightened. When she went to bed, he stayed at the table long after the apartment fell silent. The familiar questions returned. What if I hadn't helped her that night? What if I had chosen myself instead of doing what was right? The thought made him feel ashamed, but it also felt tempting. He pressed his palms flat against the table. I did the right thing, he whispered. But the words sounded thin in the empty room. The breaking point came quietly. 3 days later, Ethan opened the mailbox and found a final notice from the electric company. Disconnection scheduled, 48 hours, his vision blurred. He had promised Lily they were okay, that everything would work out. He had told himself the same thing every night. But now the truth stood in his hands, stark and unforgiving. That evening, he cooked the last of their groceries: rice, a can of beans, and 2 eggs. Lily ate happily, unaware. "Daddy, can we have pancakes tomorrow?" she asked. "Maybe this weekend," he said. She nodded, trusting. After she went to sleep, Ethan picked up the phone and dialed the number he had been avoiding. The landlord answered on the 3rd ring. "I'm sorry," Ethan said before the man could speak. "I know I asked for time last month. I need a few more days." There was a long pause. "I can't keep doing this, Ethan," the landlord said. "I've got my own bills." "I gave you a break already." "I understand," Ethan whispered. "I'm working." You have until Friday," the man said. "After that, I'll have to move forward." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone. Friday was 2 days away. That night he did not sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, knowing that sound might soon disappear. He thought of Lily waking up in a dark apartment, of trying to explain something no 6-year-old should have to understand. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, a dangerous thought crept in. Maybe I can't do this alone anymore. The realization felt like failure. He had promised himself he would never need anyone, that after Lily's mother left, he would be enough. But maybe being enough didn't mean carrying everything by himself. The next morning, after dropping Lily at school, Ethan walked not to work but to a building 2 blocks away from Riverbridge, a social services office. The sign in the window read, "Emergency Assistance and Family Support." He stood outside for several minutes before opening the door. Inside, the room smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. A woman behind the desk looked up. "Can I help you?" Ethan swallowed. I need help," he said. The words felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. She handed him a clipboard. "Take a seat. We'll see what we can do." The waiting room was quiet, filled with people who avoided each other's eyes. A mother rocked a crying toddler. An older man stared at the floor. Ethan sat with the clipboard on his knees, staring at the questions. Reason for assistance requested, monthly income, dependents. He filled in the answers with shaking hands. When his name was called, he followed a caseworker into a small office. Her name was Angela. She spoke gently, without judgment. "Tell me what's going on," she said. And for the first time, Ethan didn't filter his story. He didn't minimize. He didn't pretend. He told her about Lily, about his job, about the night that changed everything, about the bills, the letter on his table. By the time he finished, his voice was raw. Angela nodded slowly. "You've been carrying more than anyone should," she said. "But you don't have to carry it alone." She explained the program's temporary utility assistance, emergency rental support, food aid. None of it was a miracle. None of it would fix everything. But it would keep the lights on. When she handed him the paperwork, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months: relief. Not because his problems were gone, but because he was no longer drowning in them by himself. That evening, when Lily came home, the apartment was still lit. The hum of the refrigerator was still there. She skipped inside. "Daddy, the lights are on," she said cheerfully. "See? I told you we're okay." He smiled weakly. "Yes," he said. "We are." Later, after she fell asleep, he sat on the couch and let the weight of the day settle over him. He had asked for help, and the world had not ended. The weeks that followed were not easy. Assistance kept them afloat, but pride was a stubborn thing. Every time he swiped a food voucher at the grocery store, a familiar shame crept in. Every time he opened a cupboard that was fuller than it should have been, he felt both grateful and defeated. At Riverbridge, work continued. Ethan buried himself in projects and helping others navigate the same systems he now relied on. He taught workshops on budgeting for families who lived paycheck to paycheck, standing in front of people who looked like his future could have looked. One afternoon, after a session, a woman approached him. "You talk about money like it's not something to be embarrassed about," she said. "Like it's just life." He paused. "Because it is," he said quietly. "Struggling doesn't make you less." She smiled, relief in her eyes. As she walked away, Ethan realized he was finally starting to believe his own words. But the emotional weight remained. Some nights after Lily went to bed, the anger surfaced. Not loud, not explosive. Just a quiet, aching resentment. I did the right thing. Why did it cost me everything? He thought of Claire, of the question that had unraveled his life. He wondered if she ever thought about him anymore. If she remembered the man who had simply helped her when she needed it. Or if he was just another problem that had been neatly filed away. One evening, while scrolling through old emails, he found her name. He stared at it for a long time. He could write. He could tell her what it had truly been like. How close he had come to losing everything. But what would it change? Nothing. So he closed the laptop. Some things were better left unsaid. The real test came unexpectedly. One night, as Ethan walked home from work, he noticed a woman sitting on the curb outside a closed shop. She was shaking, clutching her phone, tears streaking her face. He slowed. In another life he might have walked past, might have told himself it wasn't his problem. That helping was dangerous. He stopped. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled. I lost my purse. I don't have money for a cab. My phone's about to die." The memory hit him like a wave rain, streetlights, a woman unsteady on her feet. For a split second, fear tightened in his chest. What if this goes wrong? What if helping again costs me more than I can afford? Then he thought of Lily, of the world he wanted her to grow up in. He pulled out his wallet and handed the woman the cash he had. "Get home safe," he said. She stared at him, stunned. "Thank you," she whispered. As he walked away, heart pounding, something shifted inside him. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. That night, Lily noticed his quiet smile. "You look happy," she said. "I am," he replied. "Why?" He thought for a moment. "Because I remembered who I am," she beamed. "You're my dad?" He laughed softly. "That too?" Slowly, imperceptibly, life began to rebuild itself. Not into what it had been, but into something different. The nonprofit offered him more responsibility. Mark trusted him with major projects. His work began attracting attention from other organizations, not because of his past, but because of what he was doing now. One afternoon, Mark called him into his office. "We've been awarded a new grant," he said. "And I want you to lead the program." Ethan blinked. "Me? You've lived what these families are facing," Mark said. "That gives you something no resume ever could." For the first time in months, pride warmed his chest. Not the hollow pride of status, the quiet pride of purpose. At home, Lily thrived. She brought home a report card with bright red marks. "Look, Daddy, all A's." He lifted her into the air, laughing. "I knew you could do it." They celebrated with pancakes, real ones this time, not just a promise. As they ate, Lily looked at him seriously. "Daddy?" "Yes, Peanut? When I grow up, if someone needs help, I'm gonna help them. Even if it's hard." His eyes stung. "That's a beautiful promise," he said. She smiled. "I learned it from you." Late one evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He thought of everything he had lost. And everything he had found, he had lost a career. But he had gained something deeper, a truth about himself that could not be taken away. That even when the world punished him for doing the right thing, he would still choose to be the man who did it, not because it was easy, but because it was who he was. The lowest point of his life had stripped him bare, and in the emptiness he had discovered what remained. Love, integrity, and the quiet, unbreakable will to keep going. Spring came quietly, not with grand declarations or sudden miracles, but with small, ordinary changes, sunlight lingering longer in the evenings, children's voices returning to the park across the street, the smell of rain no longer cold but fresh and alive. Ethan noticed these things the way someone notices a steady heartbeat after surviving an illness. Proof that life, somehow, was still moving forward. At Riverbridge, the new program he led began to take shape. Families who had once walked through the door with the same hollow look he once carried now sat in his workshops, pencils in hand, eyes tired but hopeful. He taught them how to organize their finances, how to speak to landlords, how to apply for assistance without shame. But more than numbers, he taught them something else. "You are not broken," he told them. "You are navigating a system that was never designed to make things easy. Struggling does not make you less worthy." Some nodded. Some cried. Some simply listened in silence. Every time he felt the same quiet certainty. This is where I belong. Not in glass towers. Not in rooms where perception mattered more than truth. But here, in places where people needed not perfection but understanding. At home, Lily flourished in ways that surprised him. Despite everything they had been through, she remained bright, curious, stubbornly joyful. She invited neighborhood kids over for drawing sessions on the floor. She made up songs while brushing her teeth. She asked endless questions about the world, as though pain had not taught her to shrink. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Lily curled against him with her coloring book. "Daddy," she said thoughtfully, "do you think people can make mistakes and still be good?" He paused. "Yes," he said slowly. "I do," she nodded, satisfied. "Because sometimes I make mistakes, but you still love me." He kissed the top of her head. "Always," she went back to her coloring, leaving him alone with the weight of her words. Mistakes, forgiveness, love. These were no longer abstract ideas. They were the fabric of his life now. The letter arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, no official stamp, no threatening language. Just a return address he recognized immediately. Claire Whitmore. He held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Ethan, I don't know if I have the right to write to you, but I need to say this even if you never respond. I think about that night often. And more than that, I think about the morning after the question I asked you and what it set in motion. I told myself I was protecting my career, my reputation, but the truth is I was protecting my fear. Fear of being seen as vulnerable, fear of losing control. And in doing so, I took something from you that I can never give back. I am sorry. Not in the careful, corporate sense of the word, but in the human one. I know apology does not repair what was broken, but I want you to know this. You did the right thing. That has never changed, no matter what happened afterward. I hope you and Lily are well." Claire Ethan read the letter twice, then a third time. The words stirred something deep inside him, anger, grief, and something else he hadn't expected, relief, not because the pain vanished, but because the truth had finally been named. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside the old legal notice. For the first time, he did not feel the need to hide it. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with her familiar seriousness. "Daddy, are you happy now?" The question caught him off guard. I think I am," he said honestly. She smiled sleepily. "Good, I like it when you smile." He sat beside her until her breathing evened, watching the small rise and fall of her chest. She had never doubted him. Not once. And in her unwavering trust, he had found something stronger than justice, stronger than vindication. He had found purpose. The community center's grand reopening happened on a warm Saturday afternoon. Families filled the building, children running through hallways that had once been dark and silent. Volunteers handing out food, music playing softly from someone's phone. Ethan stood near the back, watching. Mark approached him, grinning. "You did this. We did this," Ethan said. A woman he recognized from one of his earliest workshops came up to him, holding her son's hand. "We're still here because of you," she said. "They were going to shut us down. You showed us how to fight for what we had." Her son looked up at him. "Mom says you're the reason I still get to come here," the boy said. Ethan swallowed. "I just helped a little," he said. But in his heart, he felt something powerful. Not pride, meaning, later, as the crowd thinned, Lily ran up to him, cheeks flushed from playing. "Daddy, did you see me on the stage?" "I did," he said. "You were amazing," she beamed. "Mommy used to say she couldn't do this," Lily said casually. "But you can." The words landed gently, but they stayed. He knelt and met her eyes. "Sometimes," he said softly, "people leave because they're hurting too much to stay." "It doesn't mean they didn't love you," Lily considered this. "I know," she said. "But you stayed." He pulled her into a hug, holding her close as the noise of the room faded around them. "Yes," he whispered. "I stayed." That evening, as they walked home under a sky streaked with pink and gold, Lily skipped ahead of him, humming. Ethan watched her, heart full. He thought of the man he had been before everything fell apart. Tired, afraid, focused on survival. And the man he had become, still tired, still afraid sometimes, but no longer hollow. Because now he understood something he had never been taught. That a life is not defined by what is taken from it, but by what remains. Months later, the invitation arrived. A national conference on workplace ethics and accountability. They wanted him to speak. He stared at the email, his pulse quickening. The idea of standing in front of a room full of professionals, people who lived in the same world that had once cast him out, terrified him, but it also felt right. When he told Lily, she looked up at him, eyes shining. "Does that mean you're famous?" He laughed. "No, Peanut. It just means people want to hear my story." She nodded solemnly. "You should tell them to be kind." He smiled. "I will." The day of the conference, he stood behind the stage, heart pounding. He thought of Claire's letter, of the electric bill notice, of the night he had almost walked past a stranger in need, of every moment when fear had tried to convince him that doing the right thing was too dangerous. When his name was called, he stepped forward. The room fell quiet. He took a breath. "I'm not here as an expert," he began. "I'm here as someone who learned in the hardest way what happens when fear outweighs trust." He told them his story not with bitterness, but with truth. About the night he helped his boss home. About the question that changed everything. About losing his job, his stability, his sense of safety. About the daughter who never stopped believing in him. "And I want to be clear," he said, voice steady. "I am not here to accuse. I am here to remind us that when systems are built on fear, good people get hurt. When reputation matters more than truth, kindness becomes a liability. And when that happens, we all lose something of our humanity." The room was silent. "I didn't do anything extraordinary that night," he continued. "I did what I would want someone to do for my child, for anyone. And I would do it again." He paused. "Because a world where doing the right thing is punished is not a world I want my daughter to inherit." When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Ethan stood there, stunned, the sound washing over him like something unreal. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, he felt whole. That night he returned home late. Lily had left a note on the kitchen table in crooked handwriting. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." He picked it up, his throat tightening. He went to her room and watched her sleep for a moment, the soft rhythm of her breathing grounding him. "You saved me," he whispered. "Not from poverty, not from injustice, but from becoming someone who believed that fear was stronger than love." Years later, Lily would grow tall and confident, her childhood shaped not by what they had lost, but by what they had built together. She would remember the nights of candlelight dinners, the grocery store trips where they counted every dollar, the afternoons at the community center where strangers became neighbors, and she would remember one truth above all others: that her father had chosen integrity when the world had offered him safety in exchange for silence. That he had shown her through action what it meant to be human. On the anniversary of that night, the night everything changed, Ethan stood by the river alone. The city lights shimmered across the water just as they had years ago. He thought of Claire, of the fear that had driven her, of the question that had shattered his life, and of the long road back to himself. He no longer felt anger. He felt something quieter, acceptance, not because what happened was fair, but because he had made something meaningful from the wreckage. He turned from the river and headed home, to Lily, to the life they had rebuilt, to the future that was no longer defined by loss but by love. Because in the end, what had been taken from him had never been the most important thing. What mattered was what remained, and what remained was everything.